So I'm Nan Simonson. I'm a health and lifestyle wellness coach. I'm also a culinary coach. I'm certified in health coaching and in culinary coaching, as well as having gone through T. Colin Campbell's course on plant-based nutrition and trained by Pan Popper to be a food as medicine coach, which I really never did, but that's what got me started. What really got me started was that when I was, 66, 67, my health was going downhill, as was that of my husband, which isn't unusual in our society with our food. I live in Southern California, about 60 miles due east of Los Angeles, just between Los Angeles and Palm Springs. And I was seeing a cardiologist for high blood pressure, immunologist for pre-diabetes, the immunologist was for high rheumatoid arthritis markers, the endocrinologist for the pre-diabetes. They had an appointment for me to have my gallbladder removed. In other words, speaking of black holes, that's the beginning when a number of our systems stop working properly and we start getting medicated because nobody wanted to talk to me about food. At that point, I had gone through almost a year, a little more than a year. Well, it was almost a year and a half of my health coach training. And I wanted to talk about food. The cardiologist even says it had less than 20%. The man was in his 40s, less than 20% to do with cardiovascular health. That's when I knew that I needed to plug my ears, scream, and run, because it's crazy talk, especially if you're familiar with Caldwell Esselstyn and his statement that cardiovascular disease and heart disease is what does he call it? A toothless paper tiger that need never occur if we do certain things in our lifestyle. And I believed that. But so I didn't do any of what all those people wanted me to do, which was as soon as they talked to me, it was to write out a prescription and tell me to do a thing, like get this perfectly good gallbladder out because it was kind of sludgy. That's what they called it. You have sludge. Stones sound even better than sludge. And I just said, no, it's going to be the food. And I was fortunate enough to be inspired by somebody who did one of the food as medicine courses that Pam Popper had certified people for. And that was in one of our beach cities called Long Beach. And there's Botanic Garden. And at the Botanic Garden, they had a 3.5-hour course on food as medicine. And it was 100%, of course, plant-based scientific information about what we're meant to eat. And then they fed us a plant-based meal. And that was the beginning. That was in, I believe, September of 2018. And by 2019, in that January, I was already plant-based because I even went to not only Pam Popper's conference, started watching Chef AJ and Tammy of Nutmeg Notebook, who was trained by Chef AJ. But also I went to True North, a fasting center, not to fast, but to spend 10 days there learning what whole food, plant-based SOS food was like, how to do it, and why it mattered. So I was entrenched. I, at that same time, went to a plant-based class at a lifestyle medical practice. And the COO happened to be in the class and said, and asked, are you a patient? No, I was referred by one of your patients to your class. And he said, and I said, Anne, I'm about to get my certification as a health coach, and this is the direction I want to take. And he said, well, our health coach just retired. Let's talk. And that's where I've been now for 5 years. So all of that was 5 years ago. This January, I started working as a health coach with a lifestyle medical practice, and that turned everything around. If I was unfortunate enough to be working with a allopathic doctor. I would think maybe that a healthy diet was taking the skin off chicken. I don't know that I would have learned what I learned through the College of Lifestyle Medicine. And that's why my book, Aging Powerfully, says, well, it says as a secondary title, accept your past, take control of your future. And I'll tell you what that means. Find vibrant health, balance, and joy. The word powerfully is really an acronym in this book because I have 10 lifestyle modalities. The first five, actually, the first one, two, three, four, five, first five are based on the College of Lifestyle Medicine's pillars of health. And I thought I would at least identify those. Not that you don't know, I believe you do. And those of you that are familiar with the college or with PCRM are very familiar with the nutrition part, and that is guiding you to, if not exclusively, but certainly heavily, a whole food, plant-based diet. You could call that vegan. I could say, well, I'm vegan. First of all, if I wear leather, which I do from time to time, then I'm not vegan. I can't say that, but I can certainly state emphatically that being vegan doesn't mean being healthy, because vegan foods, and I say, and you've probably heard this before, Oreos, French fries, and a Coke are vegan. They're not healthy. In other words, the absence of animal doesn't make us healthy. And several of you brought this up, and that is that even if you went to a vegan restaurant, you'd think, oh my gosh, now I can eat and I can feel that I'm going to be nourishing my body. That's not so. A lot of the vegan restaurants now, a lot of the vegan foods made commercially now are simply minus sans animal, but with all of the manufacturing tricks they can put together to add SOS, salt, oil, sugar, in quantities that trigger our bliss points and make us want to eat more and more. Most fast food, a lot of the restaurant foods, including the vegan foods, are full of oil, they're fried, and they have things in them that make it hard to stop. So it's hard to find whole food, plant-based meals, low oil, salt and sugar, or no oil, salt and sugar. I was at an event of Chef AJ's and we went out to dinner afterwards. And this is in Sacramento where she now lives. And there's actually a Thai restaurant that is a vegan Thai and has SOS options, meaning no salt, oil, sugar. For some businesses, that would almost be a death knell, because there are too few of us that have a palate that has been, and I'll use the word fine-tuned enough to really appreciate whole foods that are plant-based without a lot of extra hoaxing with salt, oil, sugar that makes it more palatable. A lot of people just wouldn't eat that way, and so a lot of restaurants wouldn't offer that because they wouldn't sell a lot of it. But there are places that do that. So when I went to the class, became a health coach with with lifestyle medicine, a practice here very close to my home. Again, 5 years ago in January, I saw things that inspired me to the degree that within 2 years I wrote Aging Powerfully. And the book is about the pillars of lifestyle medicine that can turn our health around, which include, as I said, a whole food plant-based diet, but include other things as well. There are actually 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, according to the College of Lifestyle Medicine. We identify 4 of them because we package 2 others in a couple of those. In other words, our nutrition pillar includes the avoidance of addictive substances like alcohol, tobacco, and I take it a step further and I talk about whatever goes into or on our bodies. I don't know if any of you read the book Fatal Conveniences. You might not want to if you don't want to be hit across the, or slapped across the face, hit on the head with things that you almost don't want to know. It's like, I don't want to go through a slaughterhouse because I don't think I'd ever sleep again. I already feel badly enough for those animals. Well, that book in a way does that to you, but I read it anyway, and I did the audio version anyway, and then I decide how much of that I'm going to avoid. But in essence, what is talked about in that book, including identifying very specifically what PFAS chemicals are, the persistent chemicals that once they're in our bodies are there, they're in our cells. There are thousands of them that are, at least 1,300 that are identified, but allowed here and not allowed in other countries. So I'm not going to get into all of that. That's not what we're doing here, but I will say if we are focused on good health, we have our food to help us with that, but we also have the avoidance of certain things. And those are those things that can change our hormones. Our food, if eaten well and properly, will not only feed our microbiome, but also balance our hormones, hard to get that out, and give us antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, phytonutrients, phytochemicals, isoflavin, on and on. Well, certain foods can do, well, the opposite and destroy a balanced system, including the microbiome. But a lot of chemicals can do that too, unseen. So that is a subject that one wants to think about and look at. And a simple way to think of it is just to go with as few manufactured products as you can. For example, although my entire house, it was built in 1941, is covered with wooden floors, those floors are cleaned with a mild vinegar solution rather than all that chemical stuff that is being sold to clean things. So that's just a brief idea and thought. But so we have nutrition, which includes what goes on and in your body. We have movement, which is exercise. I was just listening to a doctor of physiology, and he said unequivocally, exercise is king, food is queen. There are a lot of us who would say food is king, exercise is queen. It depends on that person's focus professionally. But bottom line, movement is essential, because as we're getting older, I'm less than a month away from turning 73. As we get older, we are losing muscle mass, bone strength. We are much more easily tilted. In other words, we lose our balance more easily. And all of those things have to be fought for. And by what I mean by fighting for is that we become very determined that on a regular basis, and I love this word, prioritize. We prioritize movement. It's like if you're if you're sewing, if you're knitting, if you're creating a project out of, let's say, any material. Usually you have a pattern to follow. Well, certain patterns we can set up in our life and follow them. And by following a pattern of health and putting into that pattern, some people would call it a habit. I'll just say a general pattern to your day. You put in there, regardless of what else is going on, you simply put in there a place to exercise, to move, to get our body moving with not only aerobic exercise, but also resistance exercise, so that we are, instead of the sarcopenia that assures us that we're going to lose muscle strength every year. And that causes a lot of problems as we get older. That we move in such a way, using weights, using our body weight, that we resist that lessening of strength, and at least sustain where we are now, or even grow beyond that, which we can into our 70s and 80s by taking on a strength training. And it can be 20 minutes a couple of times a week, a strength training project. I was listening to somebody this morning who is, what is she, 75 or something, and she does aerobics and calisthenics based on videos every morning. I cycle. A couple of years ago, I took on running. I'd never run in my life, but I signed up for a 10K and then thought, shoot, I don't know how to run. I don't even like it. But I did this video thing on couch to 10K and I learned to run, and I ran a 10K and I was number 2 in my age group, but there weren't a lot of my age group in there. And the next time I did a 10K, I was no, the first time was 3, the second time was number 2. And then I ran a half marathon. That's 13 and something miles. That was really gutsy. And it was hard, but I did it anyway. In the meantime, after that, and from moving wrong, I tore my meniscus in several ways. That's a knee cartilage. And so I don't run, I don't do striking exercise, but I can cycle like the dickens. And so I cycle every morning for a half an hour to an hour. This morning we rode for an hour and a half, just to keep moving, just to use those leg muscles. So you've got movement, you've got food, whole food, plant-based. We have resilience, and in resilience at Lifestyle Medical, we have 2 of the College of Lifestyle Medical's pillars, and that is sleep and stress management, and we just call it resilience. And those 2 have to be prioritized. The importance of sleep has everything to do with the way our brain works, our memory works, our learning works, our emotions, our weight. As a matter of fact, they've proven that if somebody is sleep deprived, they'll eat more because they feel so badly. Their body tells them to gain energy, and they'll go to food to gain energy. Their limbic brain, our old, well, our lizard brain tells us you're starving, thinking that we feel so badly, again, from lack of sleep, that we should eat. And there are a number of things that a lack of sleep will do. We prioritize at anywhere from 6.5 to 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours, or even 9 are more ideal. But if we don't prioritize it, we get stuck on a program night after night. We go to bed too late, have to get up early for work or something else, or we go to bed so late there's no time for exercise. I learned all of that. I used to go to bed at 11 because that's when my programs ended. Now I go to bed at 9, lights out by 9:30 or 10, so I can get up early enough to do a sauna and then a half an hour to 45 minutes or an hour of exercise. And then every night after dinner, we walk a half an hour. And those things make a difference with aging powerfully. When we stop doing what moves us forward, we start moving backwards. And it's no fun. And it's easy to think that, well, because we look around us in our society and our population and think, well, that's what everyone does. That's not so. People simply aren't caring for themselves as well as they can. And then community. If you look at the blue zones, these pillars of lifestyle are right out there for us. These communities that live the longest in the world, those 5 communities that have been identified, Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, the Nagoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, and 15 minutes from my house, the Seventh-day Adventist community of Loma Linda, California. And they're surrounded by junk food restaurants, and yet they still live an average of 10 years longer when they practice the precepts of their spiritual faith. The Seventh-day Adventists believe that the body is a gift from God, and in the precepts of their religious training, they are taught to move to be primarily, if not exclusively, plant-based. A lot of them, or most of them, are vegetarians, and to take a day of rest and to prioritize sleep. So they get this, and it's given them a much healthier, longer life. And community is part of that in the blue zones and the Seventh-day Adventists, in all of the blue zone communities, those longest living and healthiest centenarians in the world. why did all of this mean so much to me? Partially because I came away from being treated the way I saw so many people who came to our clinic with bottles of medication, with one gentleman, and we have photos of this, came to us because they were about to amputate his leg. He had been bitten by a brown recluse spider, and it had been about a year and a half, and his leg was necrotic, and there were other things that were going wrong with him. He was 70 pounds overweight, and they couldn't stop the degeneration, and they were about to cut off his leg. He went whole food plant-based, and within 3 months, we have photos of what his leg looked like 6 months later. It had the coloration of a scar, but it was a perfectly normal leg. He golfs, he plays, oh, what is that disc that you throw at a cage out in a park? Disc golf. He and his wife are so active, and it's now been 5 years, and his weight is down to a normal, healthy weight. But this changed his life by not only changing his diet, but practicing carefully the precepts of lifestyle medicine. My book is, when somebody says powerful, and thank you, what that means is that I came through to these conclusions and the appreciation of seeing how we could change lives by promoting health, not by promoting medications and procedures that would keep the person sick, but maybe less symptomatic, rather than literally healing them. The lifestyle medical version gets patients in, and we work on healing people. And so I see what these changes do to people and for people. I run a support group every Tuesday morning for the group with lifestyle medical. That's part of our support group. Anybody can be, that's in our clinic. And I've done that now for 5 years. And I see these people entering their 70s, 80s. We don't have a 90-year-old yet, but almost. And they are the picture of health because of the way they eat and the way that they apply lifestyle. So I knew I was sick physically when I started getting these recommendations by the experts. And unfortunately, that's what our doctors do. You go to the cardiologist, the immunologist, the endocrinologist, the surgeon, and get taken care of. That's pretty much the way it is. Instead of, let's talk a while. Let me find out about how you feel. Are you stressed? Are you sleeping? Do you move? What are you eating? That's what they did in lifestyle medicine for me, but more importantly, that's what I've learned to do with this belief. But my earlier years were, they were troubled. I was troubled as a kid. I was suicidal as a kid, twice attempted. I went through a 40-year marriage with the man I still think about every day. And he's been gone now 13 years. He died of esophageal cancer at 62. And through most of my adult life, I had an eating disorder. I was bulimic. I was basically a binge eater that couldn't stop, and yet terrified of gaining weight. And so I was bulimic. That's fighting the devil, because it's something that everybody I knew, when they read the book, said I had no idea. Even my son, who's 46 now, and the book came out, what, 2 years, 3 years ago, it'll be in January this year, said, Mom, I had no idea. That's and some of you may relate to having a secret of any kind, a secret that when others, I'll say judge us, but in a good way even, compliment us, have a belief about our strength and power, and you know that's not so, it's almost worse than no compliment at all, because we know what they don't know. And so really, it's shameful. And I lived for all those years with shame. How did I stop that? I stopped it with a book called Brain Over Binge that simply taught me that it is the limbic system, that limbic brain, that gets very used to the status quo of behavior. And when we get uncomfortable, tells us to keep going in that direction, and that we can ignore it, that we can simply understand what it is and ignore it. I knew at a certain point, because my life was good. It was a good, successful life. I climbed in several layers of success in several careers. And still, it didn't matter if things were great. I was hooked on food. I was addicted to food and to binging. And I knew this wasn't emotional. It was habitual more than anything, because I could be perfectly happy and still go on a binge. Well, I learned what that was about, learned to move away from that with the help of that book. But you know what really made the difference was whole food plant-based eating. Now, there are patterns even in whole food. How am I doing time-wise? Or am I okay, Rochelle? And then I'll stop and we can have questions and answers. There are patterns in plant-based eating as well, because whole food plant-based is excellent for our microbiome, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're eating a well-balanced combination of foods, because we can still be eating way too heavily with the foods that are, I'll call it too rich. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Barber rolls. I'm going to reach up and get something that's on my file cabinet. I'll do that in a minute. Barbara Rolls with Volumetrics wrote a book. She has a lab, Dr. Barbara Rolls. Is it at Penn State? Where is she? But at a university, she runs a lab and tests people, and has for years, wrote the book Volumetrics, proving that people tend to, regardless of what their diet, eat a certain amount volume-wise every day. And it tends to be 3 to 5 pounds a day. She also tested what will keep people continuing to eat. And what she found is their fullness, our fullness, the receptors in our stomach that tell us, well, by and large, because there are nutrient receptors, there are volume receptors as well, but it's especially the volume receptors tell us that we're full and we stop eating. We can have, I'll exaggerate, I don't know anyone who would do this, but a half a cup of oil, and it would fill a fraction of the stomach, and we'll still be looking for something to eat because we'll feel empty. And yet a half a cup of oil at 8 tablespoons at 120 calories per tablespoon is what? Almost 1,000 calories. One of the things that I was taught at True North, the fasting center, and from Chef AJ and from Dr. Esselstyn and from Dr. McDougall is to not eat or not include in my cooking or in my eating processed oils. That processed oils, other than maybe cold pressed olive oil, but all oils are calorically very dense at 4,000 calories a pound, and yet they don't make a difference in terms of our fullness receptors, as opposed to, let's say 500 calories of broccoli, spinach. How about rice and some beans? That kind of a meal, if that was whole food, would fill our stomach completely. If a lot of that was greens and beans with some grains and, greens and, let's say, some tubers and some cruciferous vegetables, in other words, those really healthy things, and then some beans and some grains, totally fill us up, keep us full for hours and hours, and be very satisfying as what they call satiating. So what I'm going to show you is this one. You can find if you go to just Chef AJ, or actually just look up caloric density chart. This chart is something that that became part of my pattern of thinking, which kept me from fearing that eating was something that I had to fear. Getting full was something I had to fear. Um, Eating to satisfaction was something I had to fear. Remember, I went through a lifetime fearing all of that. If I got too full, I thought that was something that was a bad thing. Well, I learned about caloric density, and I learned about whole food plant-based, and I learned about what those foods would do for my body. And what this chart shows us, that red line is the caution point. For some, it would be the stopping point, but I'll just use the word caution. And this is about pounds or calories per pound. Now, I don't measure, I don't weigh, I don't do all those things I did when I went through years of Weight Watchers trying to learn to stop binging, through years of Overeaters Anonymous trying to learn to stop. It was decades and decades, actually almost 50 years. I was tethered to, well, I'll call it shameful eating. At least I felt shame over it. Okay, so this side of the chart is anywhere from, well, I'll call it radishes. In other words, 50 calories a pound. I don't know if radishes are 50, all the way up to 600. And that is everything that we're encouraged to eat with whole food plant-based eating. Uh, Vegetables, greens, um, again, cruciferous vegetables are about an average of 100 calories a pound. You go up to fruit and it's about 250 to 3. You go up to tubers, potatoes, that's 3 to 4. You go to grains, and that's about 5. You go to beans, and that's about 6. All of us, most of us, I certainly can feel so satisfied with a meal full of that food, and in many cases, eat, well, have to stop before we finish a plate of those foods because they're calorically light, but because they fill us up with fiber and their water and their nutrition, um, it would be very hard to overeat on those foods that are 600 calories or less, and that combines with or becomes our meal. What's on the other side? Well, avocados are 750. Does that mean we don't eat avocados? My husband has one every day on an open face avocado, tomato, and red onion and lettuce sandwich, and it's heavenly. I take a bite of it, and it's just heavenly. I have a big salad with a lot of things in it. Both of us have beans every day as well. You get to 1,200 calories, and now you're in bread and you're in refined carbohydrates. You get to 18, you're in meats, a lot of meats. 2,500 is chocolate. 2,800 is nuts and seeds and nut butters and tahini. I still have that, but I have little teeny bits of that to add flavor to sauces, not a lot, because that's where you get in trouble. 2,800 calories a pound. Take a tablespoon or two or a teaspoon or two. I do tablespoons of flax and chia on my oatmeal every morning. And then oil, again, is 4,000 calories a pound. This is a pattern. You don't have to follow it. But if you're whole food plant-based and you think, but this isn't working well, I'm still heavier than I want to be, I'm not feeling as healthy as I want to, you might be eating too much on the other side of the red line and not a lot of those foods that you could eat far more of. Love the flavors of the fruits and vegetables and greens and grains and legumes. And that's just a matter of a pattern. The patterns are in exercise, in our community, the way we connect with other people, because we don't survive without other people in our life. That's the last pillar. We've got to have people in our life because we're tribal people. We depend on each other. As a matter of fact, we are emotionally and biologically dependent on other people in our life for health and happiness, and then our movement, and then our whole food plant-based diet. So my book covers the challenges, my husband's death, my handling that, my meeting somebody else, and I did remarried. I've been married 11 years to my other husband. And my belief and my mission involving the precepts of lifestyle as medicine. And I would not go back ever to the way I lived before, because I see and I know the difference. And I feel like I'm aging backwards. It's been 5 years and I'm healthier than I can remember being, well, forever, because what I was doing to my body was awful when I wasn't eating well because I was addicted to foods and to binging. And I finished the book with 10 modalities of lifestyle as medicine. But one of those I haven't mentioned, and I'll end with that, is purpose. We have to have purpose to even bother with decisions that can be slightly uncomfortable because they take a changing of habits or a changing of our lifestyle. I knew when I was about to turn 70 that I could do it badly or I could do it well. And I had seen what well looks like because I'd already been with Lifestyle Medical for a couple of years. And I thought, you know what, Nan? You've got another 10, 20, or 30 years ahead of you. 10, 20, or 30 years at 70. Why not? They're doing it all over the place, especially in the blue zones because of lifestyle choices. And that's what I decided. And then I stated a mission in the book, and that mission was to spend the rest of my years just passing the word on about lifestyle as medicine, how wonderful and beautiful life can be when we adopt certain behaviors that our body wants, our mind wants, that are even good for our spirit. And I think I'll leave with that. And I want to thank you for your attention. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Nan, thank you so much. This is going to sound like a strange question for anyone who hasn't read the book. Nan, can you remind me what the symbolization of, I know you love sunflowers.
Yeah, you can see them behind me there and there.
And then in your book, each chapter has like a sunflower. I know you explain why, but I cannot remember why.
All right. It's actually the 4th page of my book that talks about the sunflower and explains that. And I'll say that I'll just repeat the first paragraph. We each have a particular flower that informs our soul. For me, it's the sunflower. When I imagine, see, or hold a sunflower, it lights me up on the inside. It brings a smile to my face and energizes my step. Why? Because it's not necessarily the most beautiful flower, nor is it the most colorful, intricate, delicate, or fragrant. It doesn't necessarily play well with others. And in a vase, it can be a bit brutish in this way. Why does it speak so deeply to me? Because the sunflower is tough. It springs up from the poorest of soils, and I did. My father left us when we were 2, 3, and 4, and I talk a little about this in the book and how difficult things were in those younger years. It springs up in the toughest of soils. It represents resilience under undesirable circumstances, and in human terms, as I see it, that translates to strength, confidence, tenacity, flexibility, faith, focus, optimism, and longevity. Boom.
Thank you. So, every time I see a sunflower now, I think of you. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say the last reading you did just was so beautiful to me. And my sister's going through a rough time and she loves the sunflower. It does that for her. And I am going to buy your book, but I am definitely going to share that with her. So thank you. And I relate to many of the things you shared about your experience, and I'm very grateful for you doing this work and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Who was talking? I couldn't tell who was talking.
My name is Anu.
Anu.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah.
You're a little bit in the shadow, and
Yeah, there's not some great light here, but I'll
yeah.
see if I can put some light. I don't like the light, but there's a little more
There
light.
you go. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.